the RS200. I'm going to go ahead and let Tyler talk about that because he's had to talk about that quite a bit. So.
Yeah. So the RS200 dates back to the Group B era. For those of you that aren't too familiar with Group B Rally took place in the 80s. It ended up being banned just because of the amount of fatalities. There was loss of life to drivers as well as spectators, and ultimately they ended the sport as a result to that. Ford had developed a car before or around the beginning part of Group B. Unfortunately, weren't able to compete too much in Group B with this car before it resulted in ending the sport. So they ended up taking it to World Rallycross, and there was a few private teams. They called them the E2 cars, which were handpicked by owners to essentially just convert them. And when I mean handpicked, they were picked of the 200 homologated cars that Ford had built for Group B. This particular car was driven by Mark Rennison, and it won at least one championship, but it may have won two. Again, hazy details I'm not 100% specific on, but it was a winning championship car between 86 and 1990. This was his championship livery for that year, and this livery has been redone to commemorate that. This is chassis number 68.
This is the 2.4, isn't it? The
BDT. So this one is actually a 2.1. It started...
Or 2.1,
yeah,
but it is the BDT.
It is the BDT. So this car actually, in its earlier years, started as a 1.8.
So basically this car was brought to us by a man named David Nguyen.
Apparently he was appointed by the Vatican to make or remake Michelangelo's famous sculptures.
Which is insane.
Made from the actual mold of Michelangelo's Pieta, which currently sits behind bulletproof glass at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the statue is the first of 112, which are being produced by Art Divine. Founder and president of Art Divine, David Nguyen, spoke to the crowd gathered for the ceremony and introduced Richard and Esther Stewart, the couple who donated the masterpiece.
But yeah, that kind of tells you what kind of person could own this car.
Yeah.
And he is a car guy in a sense that he daily drives 911. He can definitely respect the car and get behind what it's.
Yeah, he knows the history and where it came from, and that kind of enticed him to buy and purchase this car.
How it came to be that this car ended up with us, the way I would put it is the shop was pretty lucky to get David to call here and for Tyler to even pick up and know what the car was. Because that's what got him into the door. After he got into the door, the shop spoke for itself. I don't think that David would ever approve work, especially on a $500,000 car, if he didn't feel comfortable with the people that he was doing business with.
Mm-hmm. So it had been to a shop for servicing in California.
and the one that was in Vegas.
And there was one in Vegas that it had stopped into as well. And yeah, some questionable things were done to it at
For example, the tires. The tires that were put on this car, not only were they just, well, they're the wrong size, first of all, but they're also flipped. So each corner has a flipped tire, and they're both different sizes. And this is a four-wheel drive car. And the tires that were chosen are just basic, generic. What are these?
They're Falcons. Yeah, they're pretty much off-the-shelf Falcons. You can literally walk into Walmart and buy these tires.
The good thing though is because his original plan was for us to take a look at the engine, get it started, and then go from there. We did go ahead and pull the engine apart, which we have some time lapse of. And after taking off the valve covers and everything, the engine's
so the engine, it seems or appears to have been rebuilt or
for having questionable
refreshed at some point. Yeah. I don't know, and that's kind of the history with this car. It's really hazy. You don't know. There's like a blind spot in this car's history of ownership where at one point in time it was torn apart, and there's no documentation of any of this stuff being done. Obviously some body panels and some other things that belong to the car were lost during this process as well. But that being said, David approached us. He said, hey, this car hasn't ran in 30 years almost. Like, what do we need to do to get it running? like anything that sits for a really long time, especially if it's had fluids in it before, you know, generally,
or race fuel,
things like that, or it's been abused in some way before. You know, it's like with any barn find, you know, just because you find a rare historic car in a barn and it hasn't been driven even, maybe has less than 100 miles on it.
Doesn't mean you can go ahead and...
You can't just get in it and turn the key and, you know, put some gas in it and some oil in it and call it a day. You know, generally everything needs to be redone and gone through. You're going to have to replace, you know, every rubber hose, every rubber line. You know, you're going to have to drain everything. You're going to have to take things apart and inspect them and make sure nothing got rotted or corroded. It's a very long, drawn-out process.
So as you can see, this is where we kind of discuss options with David.
He's kind of come to the conclusion, looking at some of the other cars on the market, that the only way to really get this thing properly sold is to update it and modernize it and fix all of these issues. And that being a race car as well, you know, there's a lot of things that are just zip tied. And when I mean zip tied, like they've been zip tied since 1987.
Big old beefy.
Like you could tell that these zip ties are like as old as I am. You know, and that was the thing, is it's
the
a track of this car.
Is held on by all threads.
Yeah, it's just, you could tell clearly that the stock mounts for the intercooler were not good enough, so they chopped them off and they just put all thread on it, you know, because they have a car that's jumping around on dirt and mud and you know, and bumping into other cars and you know, and that's kind of the thing, is like this car was meant to just go out and win races. They didn't care about the quality of the wiring and the issues, and if they had a gremlin or a problem, they just fixed it, and they did it however possible. If that meant just twisting some wires together and running some electrical tape over it so that they can get to the next stage and compete, that's what they did.
The way that this car is going to be modified is everything original will be saved and can later be put back on the car if chosen.
You know, I don't want to take the history away from this car, but the history is just dated and it doesn't really work anymore.
But that's the thing, we're also not the type of people that can buy this sort of car. So for collectors, like Cobb, Cobb likes to collect all these fancy little old bits like the Bosch ECU.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, like whatever they can get their hands on, they'll buy it. So
yeah, so that's the thing, is even pieces of this car are valuable to the right person. You know, you can take the EFI system out of this car and there's a collector somewhere out there that's willing to pay top dollar even for components.
It probably will see track time again.
But it's not going to be on a competition level.
Right.
And that's really what's important. You know, this is something that whether David or a future owner or something, they take it out on like a wide open Wednesday kind of a thing.
Kind of like a cruise.
Yeah, just you could take it to, if it's street legal, you could take it to car shows. You could take it to like a Cars and Coffee.
Something you don't have to worry about if it's going to start in the morning.
Exactly, yeah. This is a car definitely where we're going to get it to a point where, you know, it can be ran on pump gas and it can start every time. And
you don't have to lift the hatch every time you want to fill it up.
Fill it up, yeah. Definitely, we're gonna, you know, make some good changes to this vehicle.
And if you have any questions or you have any history on this car, because how many people have reached out? His son?
So Mark Runnison, the original driver of this car, his son Ben.
The engineers that worked on this car?
Yeah, some of the engineers that actually worked at the Ford plant, like, or the Ford division that was building this car.
Like a ton of people have already reached out.
Loads of people have reached out. Feel free to just message our shop page.
It's super cool with the history.
It is really neat. We've met a lot of really cool people just in the last couple of months. But yeah, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Alright, where do we...
You said 12.
How long will this take? This video?